Hey, everybody. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another and third episode of NuAunts. I am
Mhm.
Kelly,
I'm Leffy.
I'm Kate.
and we are back again to talk more about the very nuance of life, things that are going on in the world, our unique perspectives that we want to share with you all. Tonight, we're going to be joined by a wonderful guest that Letty will introduce in just a little bit. But we wanted to start off by talking about like what is most like pressing to me right now, which is we are in a next voting cycle. We have midterms coming up this year in the fall. A lot of states have already experienced or will shortly experience primaries to narrow those fields of candidates because we are going to try to get back a lot of the rights that we have lost recently. Um, that laugh is I'm not amused by it. I'm just like in shock that we're here um with so many different spaces that have been removed from our lives in an easy way or a normal way or regular way, that we have to go back to the drawing board in a civic way to get them back. Georgia just had a primary last month. And so we got out to vote for our narrowing the field for our governor race that's coming in November, which, we have the potential. Right now, we're a red state. We have the potential to become more of a purple state and hopefully one day a blue state so that we can get back a lot of those. Some of the rights that I'm speaking about are reproductive rights. Georgia had reflexive laws that once Roe v. Wade got rolled back by the Supreme Court overturning that decision, we went to a 6-week abortion ban. A lot of women have had their lives either lost or severely affected, losing fertility, um, having lifelong disabilities thereafter because they weren't able to get the reproductive care they needed. And we were hoping that with that last election, that was also our primary, they slid in final voting for new Supreme Court justices for Georgia. So new judges that would have helped us get over that hump, but they did not get elected. So we're hoping that in the fall we can get some representatives sent up to Washington to help us push forward some new progressive roles so that they can move that us forward as a country to get back more of our rights. How about you ladies, where y'all are located? What's it looking like on the voting?
Letty, you first or me? Well, I'm actually about to move, so I'm leaving Virginia, and I actually was considering which state my vote would count in most to move to, but I don't think we're going to be that extreme this time. Um, yeah, I mean, I think I've been thinking more about voting. It was always so. My dad was a World War II veteran, and he just loved this country, and he was an immigrant. All four of my grandparents were immigrants. And so, being a part of America, what America means to people, those stories, that hope, the Statue of Liberty coming in through Ellis Island, all those kind of stories are kind of baked into my family history. And so voting was something that I was raised as very important to vote. But honestly, when I think back about my voting history, it's mostly been in the major elections, and even that is a little bit of a challenge, especially in places they're restricting mail-in ballots and this and that. It's a little bit of a challenge to get out there on a Tuesday, especially for people who work jobs that the boss is not that accommodating, and they really can't afford to put their jobs on the line, all that kind of stuff. But what I'm learning more and more as I'm just watching, as Kelly said, kind of right after right be either removed or challenged, is I'm thinking a lot more about elections that I haven't really participated in, or at least done the research on, like school board elections or local elections and special elections. And I think we're going to try to put in the notes for this different resources for people, because it can be overwhelming to know where to go. But when you think about state level stuff and local level stuff, that's where people get the experience to then go on and go to the federal level. And so, when you're building your bench for like 20 years from now, who you want to see in Washington, it's coming from the state level. And
Yeah.
also rights are getting taken away. Kelly talked about there were reflexive things in place for when Roe v. Wade was removed that just went into effect. Those things are at the state level. And so really paying attention to your state, because the federal elections can feel out of reach. You know, right now with the gerrymandering, I think people are saying in the coming election, they feel that there's truly only 14 seats out of all of the seats that really are toss up. So it just feels like, you know, when you have those feelings that your vote doesn't count, I think it's really go back to that state level and just try to learn a little bit about civics. There's a wonderful Boston College professor who actually happens to be a neighbor of mine. I've never met her, but she lives like 10 minutes from my house in Maine. And she does a daily podcast called Letters from an American. And she contextualizes stuff, you know, when you feel like, wow, this is unprecedented. Sometimes it's just unprecedented in your lifetime, you know, and there's a parallel in history and you can learn from what people did, really creative things. Like it's the most interested I've ever been in history. But I think it's because the issues are so relevant. You know, I'm looking for where do we go from here?
Absolutely.
So.
What do you think about that?
I guess it feels a lot. It feels heavy that, you know, us jumping even right in. Because it's, you know, I just looked at Ballotpedia. It says in my neighborhood, I have an election on June 23rd. Obviously, on behalf of Brides March, I'm pretty active in my community. So I've seen that elections are coming from, you know, posts, activities, new accounts, because right, politicians can't like promote themselves while they're in office and stuff, you know, all those like little things that you see going on. Yeah. I also know that in Washington Heights right now, there's actually someone running for Congress who's a young lady trying to take the seat of an incumbent who is he's been coming to the Brides March since like the first or second year of the Brides March. You know, he was a city councilman and he was I think an assembly. Now he's a congressman. He has brought the Brides March to DC. And when there were when the first thing started happening around Israel and like the narrative about Jewish people feeling unsafe, and you know, I feel like some politicians were quite silent at the time, and it felt scary to stand against, you know, freedom of speech was sort of in question when it came to questioning what was happening with the Jewish community and everything. And he took a very strong stand on behalf of the Jewish community, which is part of his district community. But I mean, there were like flags, like the blue symbol flags, like on his window. It was just a little like dissonant for me as a Dominican immigrant politician, and like just for me personally, I guess what I'm saying is it's tough. There's a lot of issues that these folks have to decide on, and then it's like when I think sometimes about he's been in public office for so long, that is an asset strategically to have someone that understands and has touched the work that I and the people that I'm working with. Yeah. And there are, you know, his you know, I would love for her to be working with him and for us to like evolve the mentality and keep the, you know, but it's tough. It's tough to, so that's getting more into like, how do we even choose who are the people that are going to represent us well? Like just even that decision-making process is a lot to hold, that by the time you go to the ballot, is it just go there and put the check mark so that you did the thing where you let the government know that people care and will vote, and so there's not a total control by government? Or do you actually try to choose someone that you feel good about? And sometimes you feel really bad after voting because the options, you know. Absolutely. So I don't want to, I hope this doesn't turn anybody off to voting. I'm just being a little honest about some of the nuances that we hold when we're like just out here living and trying to like support stuff, but it doesn't seem to make linear sense how it's going to be helpful per se.
Right. And I think that's a huge challenge for everybody. As you were saying, Letty, you have to think about it in terms of there's no perfect choice, no perfect solution, because the world is so nuanced. While there is a community, there's multiple people who have multiple priorities and goals. Like the mom who's picking a school district that child's gonna go to is gonna be different from the small business owner who's trying to make sure that their location has a great impact and the immediate community has all the needs that they that's going to impact their business in a great way. Like, so everybody's coming from a different perspective and they get one representative for to a certain degree over that, on the state level, on a national level, everything being reduced to the square miles around you, and like we're gonna pick the best candidate one that runs, right? So they might be a great person, but are they running? Are they trying to get in that fight? Because it is a fight
But
to
this is
always,
actually why primaries are so important too, because like
right?
Kelly's saying, because you
Yeah,
go and then your choice is R, D, I, whatever. But the
yeah,
primaries, that's really where most of, I think, the decision is made. And it's been
absolutely.
interesting because I feel like in this time, when you have that thinking as just like a normal citizen who's not overly involved in politics, not like overly
Mhm.
interested, you have kind of normal thinking about, okay, what does it mean to vote in the last 5-10 years Republican? What does it mean to vote in the last 5-10 years Democrat? Like you have these caricatures of issues, right? And a lot of people
Mhm.
stick to that. And there's that trade-off between what do your constituents want? So you're not even necessarily in an ideal world voting what you want, right? You're voting what your
Right.
constituents are calling and encouraging you to do, and you're listening
Yes.
to that. But there are
Yes.
some candidates coming out that are giving me real hope because they're actually rewriting how to look at the issue and
Hmm.
trying to, like, for lack of a better word, like market that to us, like, hey,
Yep.
like we don't have to think about this as a teams based approach, right?
Hmm.
Like we don't have to think about it as like this population of people versus this population of people. We can
Hmm.
actually question, like, why are we dividing people so simplistically? Why can't we just be against, genocide, or, just on a larger
Hmm.
level, regardless of like who the players are? And
Right.
why can't we have those conversations? And
Right.
you bring up like the Jewish community. There's people like Mandy Patinkin and like famous Jewish people who are, involved in advocating for the other side of, some of these issues. So there's a woman in North Carolina called Kate Barr, and I believe she's a behavioral scientist. And she ran a campaign in the primary as a Republican, even though she's not a Republican, for one of the seats of North Carolina. Forgive me, I don't know which seat, and she ran her campaign saying Kate Barr can't win. That was her slogan. And it basically was just an opportunity to go and talk to people and understand the other perspective, and also just say, hey, do you understand why gerrymandering is not great for any of us? And like, did you even
Hmm.
know that gerrymandering was happening? And like, do you even realize that because the people who are already elected are being so heavily financed that you don't even really have a vote in the primary, right? Because you've already been told who you're going to vote for. So it's not good for you either. And so all these new ideas are coming out, and it's actually making like civics really real and interesting to me. So I think
There
there's some hope with new ideas right now.
there's so many, I think it's up to us to remain hopeful, right? And I love like what you were bringing up, Kate, about people coming up with so many different ideas of how to deliver the same messages. Gerrymandering, the term is like is an older term. It's been around for hundreds of years, where essentially the districts are drawn to say like, okay, this group of people in this area get a certain amount of representation, and then they're supposed to change according to the census, which is done every 10 years. And so because there's a chance that people may move, the landscape may change, like, new commercial districts may pop up. So the nature of the people and the geography even in that area may change, so they readjust it. When you do anything outside of that normal census schedule, it's gerrymandering, where essentially you have these representatives that are coming in, and instead of the people picking their representation, the politicians pick their voters and who they think are going to put them in a position to win more heavily. So we have a huge case right now in Tennessee where they gerrymandered the heck out of the state and
Remember?
remove the largest, or dissolved the largest black voting districts in the state through, they have two major ways they do it. One's called packing, one's called cracking. And so they take the whole district, say there's 10,000 people, and they vote in groups of 3,000. So, okay, you got a base of about 3,000 of three different groups in that set. And they say, you know what, we're just going to put all 10,000 in one district. That's called packing. So now they still only get that singular representation when they really deserve three according to their demographic needs. And then the other one is cracking, where they split them up and dilute their voting power amongst majority white pools of voters. So what they want isn't as prominent because there's less people voting for the same things in those districts. And so that passed, and it removed the power of that black vote in Tennessee. in Memphis, of all places, a historically majority Black voting district. It was attempted in South Carolina, but the most winning coach in history right now, Don Staley, said, "I will leave if y'all start that stuff out down here in South Carolina." And they stopped. They were like, "Never mind, we're not going to do it," because they were so scared that they were going to miss
By
out
sports.
on those college dollars. Hmm?
I said saved by sports.
Right. And because like you have to hit people in the pocketbook, because that's more so what people are really caring about nowadays. You can't say that your finances don't affect you. So it's like, if we're going to lose out on all that money, maybe we it's not necessary. Maybe we can do this another way. But I don't want to get too far in the weeds with this. I know we've talked about a lot of great information. We'll leave that in the notes. We'll talk about Ballotpedia, which is a great site where you can go and they break it down as far as they can, through representation, different races. You can research the candidates to find out what's the best pick for you, in which area that you may be in. And Letty will introduce our wonderful guest this evening.
Yes, I guess just there are many ways to opt in to being a human in your life. You
Mhm.
can choose your friends, you can choose your food, you can choose your elected officials. um, I haven't really, voting hasn't been my main form of civic engagement. And, I've been
Mhm.
checked by my friends. I want that type of accountability for people to remind me the people that gave their lives to fight to be able to opt into voting, from how voting is so important that people haven't had the chance to do it. Black people, women in this
Mhm.
country that for many years weren't considered, their opinion wasn't considered worthy of defining the rules of our society, really, which is what politicians and laws
Or
do.
it was
And so,
considered too dangerous.
Mhm.
yeah, so I do try to remember the ancestors busted their butts with way less privileges than I have hopping on this StreamYard, and the least I could do is figure out what's the date and at least put my thing in. So we inspire you all to show out this year, whatever race you are. We do know different races tend to vote in different ways. This topic could go for 5 hours discussing where the mentality of this country is and how
Yeah.
divided we are in the importance of basic human rights, which are just
Mhm.
shelter, food, water, a little bit of dignity and love, probably a hug here and there, right?
Yes,
Like
be a
just
hug.
simple stuff.
Yes. Necessary.
And I think right now the divisive stuff they're doing, including the gerrymandering of taking away people's collective power and stuff, of voting together and stuff. It I just think it's taken away people's autonomy to choose. I lost my train a little there, but the next guest we will have has been I'm sure voting. I'm sure he's beat me on the voting thing, but also organizing just
Yeah.
in all the various ways. I was able to get to know him over the last 5 years or so as a man who has shown commitment to march with us every year at the Brides March. But in addition, he's been around through in New York City since the 60s and 70s, doing all types of different organizing and struggles with the male, and political communities. And now I'm so honored that he's stepped in to promote the rights of women, as a Black man, understanding how much that work needs all of us, and also taking care of himself as a Black man in the meantime. And so with that, I would like to introduce Baba Zayid Muhammad to the stage. Welcome, welcome. We all wanted to bring some more art into the show, so you'll notice we have some art in our background, and we're gonna keep
Yeah.
on like sort of highlighting things. Baba
You see
always
what I
has
got in the background.
you
Yes.
always have sort of history or like
Yeah, yours is very timely.
That's
Mhm.
Malcolm.
yeah. So
Yes, right.
welcome, Baba Zaid. How are you tonight?
Crazy. Newark is a battleground for ICE right now.
Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
Delaney Hall, and let me just say a couple things just quickly because I heard
please
the
say
last few
Yes.
minutes.
welcome.
And and Letty, I know you're in a dilemma because your congressman has been showing up for you, and he actually showed up in Newark a couple days ago at Delaney Hall because Delaney Hall is people are being sent to Delaney Hall from all over, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and there's somebody on the rise that's challenging him. That's to the left of him, and one of the issues that's dividing uh, the voting base is the question of what's happening between Israel and Gaza, right? And I'm gonna tell you that's That's, that shouldn't be a tough one, but there is. I want to say this about our Jewish community.
Mm-hmm.
Let's I want to say about all of our communities. Our communities are not monolithic.
At all.
The Jewish community, there is there's an expression of Jewish nationalism that is known as Zionism, that is dominating this discourse of how powerful the state of Israel has to be in the Middle East at the expense of other people's lives. And so we are, in fact, witnessing a real genocide in real terms. That is the Gaza genocide and the attacks on the West Bank in an effort to snatch and expand the Jewish state. That's real stuff. And having said that, uh, yeah, aside from this very strong Jewish lobby called APAC that is out here, that literally has his hands on people like your congressman, right? There was a powerful Jewish voice opposing what's happening in Gaza, right here in New York City, right? Jewish women, there's a whole Jewish women. I forget the full name of the organization, but they have been doing sit-ins and demonstrations in support of the people of Gaza.
Very heartening stuff. I've seen some of
Yeah,
that.
I've got a comrade named Laura Whitehorn, who was a former political prisoner, right? Who did some real stuff in solidarity with the Black Liberation Movement, kind of stuff that'll get you in prison.
It's interesting because before we hopped on, we were talking about love. I was like, are we going to talk about love today? Because we talk about current events and love. And we're like, we're going to talk about love of country.
Yes.
And, that's what you're talking about. I think
we
that
can't do this stuff without leading with love.
Right.
But I'm saying the divisiveness of the mentality of nationalism, of Judaism being a nationality that's not so hard to maintain the nationality, but in a way it's divisive of not being able to see where maybe there's still an analysis and a critique that needs to happen overall. I mean, you can still be supporting the identity and the well-being of your identity group and acknowledge current events that are happening that aren't ideal. I think just the nationalism and the love of country can get very dangerous and toxic. I mean, that's what happens all around the world, right? We're fighting.
And it can lead to things like genocide.
Absolutely. I mean, so
let me say this also too, just very quickly, right? And Kelly, you from Georgia, and Kate, you mentioned Virginia, right? And to bring this back to the heart of our conversation, violence against women. Those were two breeder states when our ancestors were in captivity. We'll talk about violence against women. Let's talk.
Yeah.
Right? They were breeder states. I came across a document a little while ago about a woman who died in her 30s, but who was forced to breed over 20 children in captivity. Those two states specialized in breeding children through female captives or female slaves. Right? As so it's no accident of history that we see in those states some intense battles over the question of the ballot, or the question of land, or all of those things that are basic to anybody's human rights. Our folks have been going through that for a long time. And the fight for the ballot was the women who were involved in that. My favorite hero on that front is, in terms of women, is the late great Fannie Lou Hamer.
I knew you were about to say Fannie, yeah.
Right? Straight out of Sunflower, Mississippi.
Yep.
Right? Who was sterilized against her will, without her knowledge, before she even got involved in this struggle.
Yeah.
Beaten within an inch of her life when she was put into a male prison. But came to my state, Atlantic City, New Jersey, in 1964, and bum rushed the Democratic National Convention and crashed the hell out of the whole country. Right?
This is so.
Y'all the sky cradlers.
Yeah. This like
memorializing Assata Shakur, my big sister, the Black Panther Party. And I'm getting emotional now. Right?
I'm feeling a bit emotional too, because breeding is not a light word to mention here, and I think that's the type of pain in specific American communities that are American communities that have been longer in this country, for a longer history than many white presenting Americans, right? And that's like when we vote understanding that this country is capable of what we've lived in this country.
Some horrible
Uh,
Absolutely.
I
things.
say we as a brown woman because my family actually migrated here in the last generation. So actually, I can't, our slave, our captivity looked different in the Dominican Republic as far as like the generations I know about.
Mhm.
But it's not like let's vote and it's great and it's important to vote because we love this country. That's not the same energy. It is a different entry point to access to voting and the importance of it. And just thanks for naming that, but it sits in a painful way that we have to grieve and heal and do so much to be getting to that alignment in this country and like face some really no one's talking about that fact in history class anywhere. Like you have to
Right.
really wait till you're late in your analysis around folks like you going out of your way to educate yourself to really hold what that means. Because if that was happening to white communities, that would have been a wrap a long time ago, with the advocacy and justice and access to legal recourse that they've had, from being full
Mhm.
humans and stuff. So, but it also makes them feel differently about voting and civic engagement, obviously, but
Yeah. But
it
I
helps
feel
all of us.
it does, absolutely. I just feel like now in this moment, we actually are getting there where all of the restriction of rights and voter suppression is reaching all communities. Like, I don't remember the specific phrasing, but the current presidential cabinet or administration, they're talking about, there's a lag in the population, and they want more people to be out there having babies, and they used some weird phrase the other day about there's a debabying that's happening or something that they said.
Demographic time bomb.
Yeah, so like they were like, we
Mhm.
need to have more babies, but they're not talking about everybody having more babies. They're talking about a specific demographic having more babies. And so that goes hand in hand with the rolling back of Roe v. Wade. If we make reproductive access to have abortions or to have any type of reproductive moderation in any kind of way, then more people will have more babies. But that's not true. Reproductive care isn't just about making sure women have babies, it's about the entire care of the female body. And so here in Georgia, I'm speaking earlier about the reflexive laws that kicked in after Roe v. Wade was rolled back. It created healthcare deserts for women because OBGYNs were afraid to practice. They thought they were going to get arrested or to come into contact with more legal restrictions. So they just moved their practices out of state or more towards areas where they wouldn't come up against as much friction. And so I'm lucky because I live in the metro Atlanta area, so I have access to competent caregivers. But people who live out in more rural areas, they do not. They have to go hours in some instances to get care in the ways that they need, or to be with brave caregivers who know exactly how to navigate around the nuances, the terrible nuances of what that means when you say if they even believe that you may be pregnant, that restricts the care that your body is allowed to receive. And then some bodies aren't able to produce babies anyway, but that doesn't mean that you're not getting cervical cancer or cysts or any other things that may need attention from those same healthcare providers. And so they're not there for those types of issues. You've already seen even representatives. There was a representative down in Florida, which is another state that had the same rollback. And she was like, oh my gosh, I need reproductive care because she was having an ectopic pregnancy, which is a pregnancy that happens outside of the uterus, which is never viable, which will kill the mother and child, or developing fetus, as I should say. And so it needs to be mitigated. She could not get that care. She reached out to the governor to be like, can you just make an exception just for me? Because she had that power and access to do so. So I think people thought, like, okay, when we roll back these rights, they're not really going to affect certain demographics. They're going to affect some people, but not the right people. The right people will always be able to get their care. And essentially in America, that just means people with money. And more often than not, those people happen to be white, but not always. So, and even this woman who had political clout, power, and means was still not able to freely access her care without having strings pulled on her behalf.
It's
So
crazy. It's crazy.
Can I chime in and just say, like, this is so true, everything you're saying. And I think there's also a subset of people who think they are more privileged than they are. And it's because they haven't, as whatever demographic, whatever strata they are within their demographic, they haven't actually lived through the repercussions of anything in their lifetime. And so some of these things are going to affect them. They just haven't realized it yet.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting to see as well, how that affects people. But I remember when there was such an uproar over the COVID vaccine, and I did end up getting the COVID vaccine because my mom was elderly, but there was such a concern about it. And I literally, because of the conversations that we've had in the past about things that have been done to different groups in this country, I planned where I was going to get that vaccination based on the demographics of that area, because I felt like if I go to a really wealthy area where there's, upper income, primarily white people, that's the least likely place that they'll send a vaccine they're not sure about. I mean, that stuff is real.
And meanwhile, it was to the
which
whole
experiment you want to talk about, with the Native Americans, Tuskegee. I mean, pick what you want to talk about, but that stuff is real. And I don't have inherent trust in every part of our system.
Absolutely. That's very valid. We did the same. When it came time to get our vaccines as well, we did.
And I'll say, with the context in mind of, say, white people, I guess we can all agree, have had a bit more positive engagements with civic action over the centuries of this country, more access to even vote, but also have seen the results of organizing in different ways in their right. So I guess I'll ask you, Kate, as a representative, to share before we shift to, I want to talk about your organizing into the Brides March, Baba, but also sort of before that. But before that, I want to end this voting topic a bit, which impacts women's rights. Like you're saying, it impacts whether you can have a child, live or die in a health challenge. So what are one or two reasons you think everyone in the United States of America should vote every single time that they can, Kate? Why is it good? Why is it important?
I don't know if I would make that statement. I mean, yes, do I think people...
Or do you think? Right, yeah, do you think?
That's a big topic, Lefty. I mean, I think in an ideal world, we would have civics class in school and education would be better and people would be raised to understand critical thinking and how to care and why it's important to research and where to go to research and what kinds of conversations to have and all of that kind of stuff. I think if you're overwhelmed, don't do everything. Just pick a few things, get involved with an organization that's already doing something and go a couple of times, because usually by the third or fourth time you go and do something, people embrace you into that circle. And if they don't, it's not your people. You know what I mean? Keep moving on. It's like anything that's important, dating, you got to go through a lot of stuff, job interviews, you got to go through a lot of stuff. This is just, I don't think people realize how important it is. And you got to go through a little bit of stuff to get a comfort level with it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's within reason. I mean, it's most of the way that things get done. I mean, there's revolutions here and there, and they're sexy, on both sides. Like, oh, let's just change it all at once. Those things don't always or even often work or have lasting effect. It's often the people chipping away behind the scenes that do. And so there's people out there who've made it their whole careers and lives to do this political stuff. Just support them. Just find them and support them. And voting's part of that. So you find somebody you respect, they can help you in that direction.
Yeah.
Right. Baba,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Kelly.
No, I was just going to say, Kate, you're absolutely right about if we were coming up with the education of being involved in civics. The ACLU has started a children's network on YouTube where they offer civics lessons that are adapted for that age group. And so you can find it on YouTube, and it's called Know Your Rights University. So that's something I will definitely be tuning into with my little one to learn more about civic engagement.
Thank you, Kelly, always with the dope resources and great information. So, Zayid, how about you? Do you think it's important to vote? Why don't you tell us how that plugs into your early organizing and today your work in the Brides March?
Well, first, let me say you made me a little older than I am. All right. In the intro.
I was like, he was organizing in the 30s and his 20s.
Where are you in that picture?
Yeah, I'm not in there. I'm not quite there. my organizing days started in the late 70s, right? Uh, this guy, I was an ex-drug dealer. This guy, I stole his autobiography in a drug transaction in
Wow.
1977, and it saved my life, really, literally, right? So that's that's the kind of stuff I come out of in terms of the madness of being a black man in America. But on the question of voting, my people died for it.
Mm-hmm.
My people were killed for it. My
Mm-hmm.
people are being targeted again over it.
Mm-hmm.
So if it wasn't a big deal, why are they always trying to take it from us?
Mhm.
Right.
Right?
Mhm.
And I would say
Right.
it's not the be all and end all to anybody's liberation or self determination, but it is an important place for what it matters for people to participate in a national or local democracy, right? Because there's a notion known as democratic pluralism, meaning
Mm-hmm.
in that kind of environment, if the Dominican communities got 20% of the population, they should be getting 20% of the resources. If
Mm-hmm.
the Puerto Rican communities is 15% of the population, why are they not getting 15%, and on and on and on, right? So just from a basic vantage point of that, voting is hugely important. I don't care
Mm-hmm.
what your background is, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's been this white supremacy has this thing where somebody has to be othered in order for that element and that mentality to dominate. And this is something that I hope this country at some point grows out of. And I'm gonna tell you, from a protest as an old protest warrior,
Mm-hmm.
the seeds for that we had it in the '60s in the battle over the ballot, over the ballot, right? We had allies, right? Like y'all look at me as a male ally in around domestic violence. We had allies from all backgrounds, and we had white allies.
Mm-hmm.
1964 was known as Freedom Summer. And this
Mm-hmm.
was a campaign to bring white allies into Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama,
Mm-hmm.
and Louisiana because
Mm-hmm.
we knew that the Klan and
Mm-hmm.
their government friends was
Mm-hmm.
not going to be as quick to kill all the white folks the way they won't kill all the black folks.
But
So
they
they
did
were
still
they,
kill them too.
they
Yeah.
sure did.
Looking at those three
Mm-hmm.
guys.
Viola Louisa had her face blown off
Mm-hmm.
with a shotgun with an FBI agent in the car with the shooters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? So I mean, we could well document it. But the
Right.
fact that that happens,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of solidarity made a difference.
It did.
Right? So it's I can go buck wild on this whole thing.
Yeah.
So
Right?
you said in the late 70s,
Huh?
you joined the conversation, you said,
Yeah, I
as an
became
organizer?
a Malcolm Muslim, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to clean myself and straighten myself enough to actually change my direction in a 180 way. Wound up going to college. It was in the college world that it became this. There was we had a black student movement tradition, right?
Mm-hmm.
In my generation, in terms of black student organizers were key in what was known as the anti-apartheid movement to challenge
Mm-hmm.
American universities to divest their investments in the wealthy racist apartheid state that was South
Mm-hmm.
Africa. South Africa was a segregated state in Africa, right
Mm-hmm.
up.
I don't feel proud of this, but Kelly and I are alums of Columbia University, and I'm having like a little bit of deja vu on what you're talking about here with the universities and their role, and they're just blatant support of things that don't seem to go with education and, I don't know, thought leadership.
and,
It's
and students
shocking.
make the difference
Very
in
shocking.
sharpening those conversations. And I just want to, and I want to put a pin in that, and also because just to help us and help you, particularly Letty, with the dilemma that you raised about your congressman, talk to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
The new sister's on the rise, win or lose, talk to her,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you have a conversation, you make a decision based on your interests and your principles.
Mm-hmm.
Who is best
Yeah,
going to
I
serve
guess it's more that I wish we were working well enough as a community to be preparing candidates that you're getting to know years in advance and everybody's like voting together instead of like having someone that's been in place for a while and losing that seat to like young energy, which could potentially lose a lot of, like I just would like to be more strategic about it. it's less about my personal thing, but you know,
Well,
I maybe I'm a
that's one
little
of the
more
things that
traditional than I realize. I don't know.
yeah, that's one of the things that the Southern Christian Leadership Conference taught us. And the Southern
Mhm.
Christian Leadership Conference was the organization of Martin Luther King,
Mhm.
and is dangerous and is very clear in terms of who his enemies were.
Mhm.
In spite of all that, they talk to everybody. You just go the letters. You can find the letters right online. Letters of the SCLC to Strom Thurmond,
Yeah.
arch segregationist, right?
Art.
But he was
Yeah.
a player in terms of legislation, so they talked to him anyway, even if
Right.
they knew he wasn't going to do anything. They
Right.
made it a matter of record. This is something that he had to reckon with and contend with. So we talk to
Absolutely.
everybody. If we do not have to be uncivil because others are, we can represent we can represent and should represent the world we want to see, the world we want to live in, and challenge our friends or folks who want to be our friends to be of the same spirit. And if they can't, then we need some new friends.
That's
Well, there's
right.
also, to your point earlier, there's also just such a dehumanization, which is kind of the old playbook, right? Like the Nazis. I mean, pick who you want, talk about the other side as animals, right? Start dehumanizing people. And I think in this country, it's become so polarized that to some degree, if people are in an echo chamber, they just have a two-dimensional view of anyone on the other side. So you want to say Republican, Democrat, you can, for people out there, you can just talk, interact with people, like you said, talk to everyone and just be a three-dimensional human so that people have a little bit of a challenge. You don't have to say anything political. You just have to be yourself, you're
Mhm.
hopefully relatively, agreeable self. And then it challenges people's assumptions of what that other side is.
Yeah,
Absolutely. There's
I
this
And
learned
you
how to.
you can
wonderful.
fight more, but that actually does a lot, I think, being human.
Absolutely, it does. There's this wonderful psychologist named Doctor or sociologist named Dr. Eberhardt, wonderful African American woman, and she has this book called Bias. And I tell anybody who listen about this book because being biased isn't something that's unique to say white people or men or any like dominant demographic. It's within everybody.
Prejudice is a survival skill.
It is. It absolutely
Right.
is. Like
Categorizing, right?
our yeah,
So you can make easy assumptions.
yeah, our development from children on up, we fall into like logical boxes of like this is safe, this is not safe, and then I'm just also going to take as many cues as I can from the people raising me and in the communities. And
Mhm.
sometimes those cues are, if I don't see it, then it must be bad. Right. So if I'm not around certain people, then they're automatically bad guys, or have some suspicion towards them because if they were good, then they wouldn't have been around me. That's just the way the brain naturally develops. It's not something that's necessarily inherently bad until then, once you get around those people, you're allowed to, or is promoted to, like you're saying, Kate, dehumanize and
Mhm.
otherize people. And so she says in the book, the best way to combat that is to get to know people. There's this wonderful story of these women who were meeting in secret for years. They were a small group of Jewish women and Palestinian women who would get together because they wanted to challenge the notions of who they thought each other were and to overcome some of the like inborn or generational angst between the two groups. And they formed this lovely bond. They didn't tell anybody. It was just them meeting. It was a small group. I don't know that it was more than a dozen women who were meeting. And over the years, they became like a sisterhood because they just began talking about family, about work, about illnesses, things that happen in human lives as you go through life, and found out they weren't really that different after all. They got to know like what were we fighting for? What are the issues now? And it became a very like human experience that they kept tenderly amongst themselves, knowing that the outside world was not going to tolerate the fact that they were willing to overcome those barriers, because that's really what's going to bring world peace. Sitting people in a room and like saying, you're human, I'm human, I need my resources, I need my food, I need energy, I need, infrastructure, we're deserving of it, everybody is, and that's it. Like everything else is just a matter of, well, I want your resources. Well, I should have more, or whatnot. And that's what we're dealing with now in America, as crazy as that seems. The richest country in the world. We have so many resources, we export them around the world. Used to do it philanthropically through USAID, but we no longer do so. People are dying around the world because we're not giving that aid because of the current administration. Um, but the idea is that, like, why are there so many people who are denying us or pulling or hoarding resources, to limit the ways that we can move and we can act? But that's not to say that we cannot. They're just trying to make sure we think that about ourselves. So,
Definitely
like
a
when you were
program.
talking
Disheartened.
earlier, Baba Zai, about Delaney Hall, it's like there are communities around the US now who, now that they're aware of what these warehouses that are being bought by the government to become detention centers, they're going to their local city council meetings and they are saying, we do not want our city or state dollars spent on this. We do not want this. And it's working. You have some places that have denied the sales, that have become huge counteractions against the development of the infrastructure. There was one here they wanted to do in Georgia, and people went out, they're like, no, how are you going to house the town? I forget the name of the town, forgive me, but maybe if there's 3 or 4 thousand people in the town, the center was going to house more than that, or say that it could house maybe double the population. People need water, people need electricity, people need land
I
to move
wonder if
around
they're
on.
strategic. Sorry, Kelly, but I wonder if
Yeah.
they're strategically placing those, because my understanding is they do this sometimes in certain districts, because I think those people still count even though they can't vote. I think they still count towards the census,
So what you are
Mm.
saying is
like
absolutely
prisons,
correct.
right? Yeah.
Yes. So a
And I say
part of
it's
the
necessary.
prison industrial complex, right? So you have one, we are the most carceral nation on the planet. And there are many other countries that are larger than the US, with our 350 million population. You have India, you have China, you have other places, their populations are way larger, but we still have the largest concentration of imprisoned people on the face of the planet. On top of that, a vestige of slavery, where you had slave owning states, they wanted representation as well, but only rich white men, were land owning men, were allowed to vote. But they still wanted the representation of a state representative to be reflective of their needs, right? So, like, yeah, there's nobody over here in Kansas or Kentucky as much as there is in New Jersey or New York, but we still want representation. So they allowed for 3/5 of each enslaved person to count as a vote, or a citizen, needing representation. And so the 3/5 clause, where
The
we, or our
Constitution.
ancestors, were rendered dehumanized by 2/5. This is also played into the electoral college. So when we say that, slavery is not gone, the impact that it has on our community has not left. When we talk about reparations, we talk about what that means. That's just one of the tenets of the way that the structure is still upheld in 2026, where we have to participate in an electoral college where it exists because they are counting people at 3/5 of a human being.
Yeah,
So
and
the
basically,
prison population, I'm sorry.
oh, go ahead, finish. Then I was just
So
gonna.
so so once you become a felon, or if you should have a felony, you become disenfranchised. You're no longer allowed to participate in civic engagement, and but you still get represented in the state. So if I'm a state and I say, well, I'm going to have this detention center and I want 3,000, 4,000, 10,000 people here, they all count towards our representation in this state, but they don't get to vote. And so all the voters come out and say they all want to vote red, when all the people inside may want to vote blue, and they outnumber the people who are voting. That changes the entire makeup of the representation for that zone and that state, because you have it's the few who are leading everybody else. And so they're not
Yes.
really being truly represented. So it's a really long-winded way of saying, Kate, you're absolutely right, that these detention centers count towards representation, that are
But
not
I'm just
truly
saying that
representing the
beyond
people.
privatizing them and potentially getting kickbacks, for
are, not
the tax
potentially.
dollars going towards the privatization of these concentration camps or detention centers. Yeah, I mean, there's a long game here, right? There's strategy here everywhere. And that's what I'm saying. It can become, if you can detach enough from it, because for me to be involved, I have to detach a little bit because it's too painful for me to think about, especially the family separation. Like when you were speaking about that woman who had 20 children and then died at 30, I just kept thinking, the assault or being bred or whatever, that wouldn't even be the worst part. The worst part for me would be parting with those children one after the other, right? And so that would just be a trauma that would be, I think, hard to come back from. And even it was 10 years ago, I think, when they had those detention centers in, which are probably still there, I think it was like McAllen or somewhere in Texas, and they were talking about these children were being separated. These immigrant children were being separated, or, maybe they weren't, I don't know what the actual population exactly was, but they were going to the foster care system and then they were lost. These children were just lost. So I'm like,
human trafficking.
have they been trafficked? Are they, and I just kept waiting under the new administration to hear, hey, we're tracking these children down. And I haven't done a tremendous amount of research, but I'd love to know what was done there. It's just horrific for me, and the things our tax dollars are going to. But if you can detach enough to be interested in the strategy of it, there's strategy and there's people, activists like, working on it. And you don't have to work in every lane, work in your lane, you know what I mean? But get in a lane and, participate a little bit. And I think that will make a difference.
I do agree with both of you that divisiveness and 3/5 of a human, or lack of humanity, right? That literally is reducing someone's humanity to a percentage of that, right? Like that those strategies have convinced a lot of us that we don't have to ever need another human being to survive with a certain salary and like a nuclear family going, people feel okay, or a dog, right? Like there's a lot of things that people are replacing human connection and care for the mutual well-being of all. Yeah. So I think we can all like, and Bob, I want to ask you, because you're a man who we're talking about your
involvement. I want to hear more from Baba.
you're in a, we're talking about a mostly woman-led, woman-founded movement of the Brides March. You have your own, like you're saying, you grew up as a Black man and had to heal yourself to even be a civically engaged in a positive way for yourself. So how do you cut across the divisive messages between men and women to then become an ally for the struggle of the rights of women and the safety of women?
There's a book, and I might have the title wrong, but he's a legend in the Black arts movement. His name is Hakeem Madabuti, called Raised by Women. I think that's the name of the book. And this is a brother who, as a writer, poet, and publisher, and educator, was very intentional out of his love for his wife and his children, right? About being as non-sexist as a man can be in a very sexist society. For me, that I was raised by a whole lot of women, right? And I'm a girl dad, right? And some of the women I raised by were in the Black Panther Party, like Assata Shakur, like Safi Bukhari Alston, who I named my youngest after, right? Like Rosemary Mealy, and I could name a bunch of others. But so I was raised by some incredible women politically, right? Like Esperanza Martel, she wasn't in the party, but she's my big sister in struggle. And it was Espy who brought me to the Brides March, right? And we've had this, and even in the most advanced, radical, progressive, upright, principle movement spaces, there's this issue of sexism. It's there. And
we talked about it. We talked about it on a previous episode about Dolores Huerta.
A legend who held on to that story for over 60 years. Over 60 years. It's nothing but a miracle that she even lived to be.
I was just saying she could have gone to her grave with it. Yeah.
But, and the story's ugly. It's not a one time. It wasn't a one night affair. That was an ugly, ongoing.
Her children are impacted today by that.
Heads off because of who he was.
Yeah.
Right. He was somebody well looked, well loved, across the spectrum, over years. We didn't know that he had that dark side, but some people have it. It's real, and it needs to be. And when we find out about it, there needs to be some repair to the harm that has taken place.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are bad things in the world, right, Baba?
Oh God, yes.
We want to believe like things are okay, but some will take advantage of situations and potentially harm you in the world. And I think it's the same with school shootings,
Yeah.
DV, like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, we need to get a little bit on the defensive because we're so traumatized and experiencing so much, or I don't know if it's always been the condition of things, but I think we need to be ready for when things don't go completely peacefully.
That's been an ongoing conversation we've been trying to have too in NuAunts. It's just about boundaries. This is more on like the relationship side, but just really thinking ahead of time because we've been so conditioned overall, I think, as women to be agreeable as a part of our personality. Like, what does it mean to have a boundary? And if you feel even the littlest push, if it's not like an enthusiastic yes, then learning what's my script for saying, basically, I need time to process this. You know what I mean? So there's boundaries is another big one, I would say.
Because it's like people like you, let's say you, Baba, when you were you mentioned a little bit about being around, causing some trouble in your youth. Had you never been forgiven or never had someone that gave you a hand or like never found yourself to have more parts of you than that, look at the loss we would have in society from you getting canceled from mistakes that you've made. And I really like this is a complicated thing because I think a lot about the person who killed my family member, loved ones that we have in common that kill see who are gonna maybe in 15 years have to see this guy. I don't think everyone needs to be forgiven and put back in society necessarily when we might all be more at risk if they're not rehabilitated and they've already demonstrated a lack of ability to control themselves. But I don't think that applies to every crime. And I think we've never sat as a council of four here to be like, what do we think are the righteous laws for when people make mistakes? There's just a legal system that's set up that called Black people 3/5, and we're still like working off of that to resolve and reconcile our issues in our society, and we don't know how to do it well. We don't know how. A lot of people are just like, I'm canceling my mom, I'm canceling my sister, like I have boundaries, like I'm living the soft life. It's great to be focused on self-care and preservation, and I think there's a ton of stuff that we all need to work on, and we do need to work on it. We're only as strong as our weakest. So you can't just sort of live a luxury life over here when there's so much stuff that needs to be addressed in society. So I guess you can, or I don't know what you think, Baba, but
Well, I lean on this guy over my shoulders, and you hear me, talking about Dr. King, and that's not contradictory, by the way. There was a time when that was supposed to be a contradictory or confrontational conversation, and it never was between the two of them. Right? Is that they both impacted on what we call the national dialogue. There was a dialogue in the 60s about what was right, what was wrong, what was fair, what was unfair, what was just, and what was unjust, right? And that conversation actually happened in the media, right? Both of them bum rushed the national media. They were so big and so powerful in their transcendence of their position that they were irresistible. The media had to contend with them, even though they were definitely afraid of both of them, right? And then so in that dialogue, in that place where state players, business players, entertainment players, media players had to have the decorum of believing in democracy and egalitarianism, even though that was not the order of the day, they were forced to confront how that was not the order of the day, and there were some things that had to happen, right? But in that, the streets was a vehicle for protest, but the discourse was often a humane discourse. These guys could talk to anybody.
you don't have to be uncivil, like you said.
That's right. Malcolm
I
could
think
talk
you
to
actually
to
lose
that,
credibility
to
if
that,
you're
to that
civil.
drug addict on the corner, and he could talk to the Dick Cavitts and the Merv Griffins and all the all the great talk show hosts that are.
Tupac came to mind as
Let's
another
go back too far for you,
political.
right?
Yeah.
But they had that, and those were important conversations,
Mhm.
and people on both sides and on all sides listened, thought, and rethought some of their own positions, and
Mhm.
that's important. We missed a moment tragically. That was the George Floyd summer, because this is one of the things that was profound about the George Floyd summer is that with the Black Lives Matter movement giving us our largest protest summer in the history of this country, those kids led by black women, by the way, young black women primarily,
Mhm.
were not alone.
Mhm.
They had their brown and their white allies with them, right? And in some cities like Minneapolis, the black voices, the black presence was actually small, and the allies actually outnumbered them.
Mhm.
And those young
That's
people,
always such a nice feeling. It's like healing.
but what was the response by the state? The response of the state was to give us Trump, and to give
Right,
us
right, right, right.
an attack on our history, the banning of books, and
Yeah.
wokeism has become an ideology unlike unto it.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, from corporate
out of fear,
anti-racist statements to
out of
no more
fear of
DEI.
losing that privilege, instead of looking at how we can make this thing we call a democracy, something real for everybody.
Yeah. Baba, how do you, when you're talking with younger men, um, and you may see yourself in them or your journey in them, how do you promote the idea of becoming an ally to women such as yourself? Like, what does that look like when you engage with them? Because as Letty told us, you were able to organize to get more men involved in Brides March, to get more men
Not enough.
aware of
We're a long way from where
domestic
we want to be.
violence.
I want to be real
Right.
clear about that. We're a long way from where we want to be. Men are not they're comfortable with that conversation. Even
Yeah.
so-called radical revolutionary men, they're not comfortable
Yeah.
with the conversation. Straight up. But
Yeah.
I'm still working on them.
Okay.
Organizers know to go after the young though, because the young are more
Yes,
open,
they are.
right?
But when you say they're
To
more
your
open,
point,
hmm
see, I lead with this guy.
With who?
Went through with
Malcolm.
women in
Oh,
his life,
Hmm
from his mother, who was a brilliant Garveyite, who was medically abused and put in a psychiatric hospital for over 25 years,
hmm
to being put on the street where he was parasitic, where some everybody was exploited, right? And to having a spiritual awakening that fundamentally changed his life and made him appreciate the women who were around him. And he was especially supported at a very critical and pivotal time in his life by his big sister, Ella Little Collins, right? And then later, of course, his relationship with his own wife, right? And being a studied revolution. We read books back in, we didn't Google. We read books about
Right.
what was going on in the world for real.
That's probably
And,
better.
we were all walking around like we had PhDs because we read like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
and you mentioned us his spiritual journey, Baba, and it reminds me, brings me back to Esperanza Martel. Is it true, my understanding, that there's a healing and spiritual body of work that you hold together? Because I feel like you have brought that male healing on behalf of a male to the male and female community for me when you're
I,
present.
I believe, this is me being subjective now. I believe that of all the tools of resilience, healing, and recovery, the strongest of them is faith.
Mhm.
Now, I challenge folks to be informed about their faith, to be humane and egalitarian about their faith,
Yeah.
but
Right,
not oppressive.
dangerously powerful.
Yeah, right. But faith is an enormous. Listen, 250 to 300 years plus of slavery, nothing but faith got our ancestors through that.
Right.
Nothing short of faith got us through that,
So
right?
let me ask you. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
Were you there?
so faith is,
Oh,
is is that,
now
and
let
then
me ask you
there's
this.
certain things in the basic practices of our ancestry that are traditional, that we are reclaiming, that are rooted in the ecology of the universe, you know, Father Sky, Mother Earth, all of that, and how we share everything ultimately, that is best for the world and best for this thing called humanity, right? That is rooted in our spiritual and traditional tradition. So I'm a practicing Muslim. I call myself a Malcolm X Muslim, right? Not a Sunni Muslim, not a Nation of Islam Muslim, not a Shia Muslim. Malcolm was my example, right? But I'm also very touched about this recovery of our ancestral wisdom and our traditional spiritual faith. So Baba, it comes out of that. For me, one level being a general in my tradition politically and militarily, but also being an elder who is deeply rooted in our spiritual traditions. We need somebody to open the program with libation, call Baba Zayid. We need somebody to do a naming ceremony. We're getting ready to have this baby, call Baba Zayid. I'm not a Baba Lao in the fuller sense of what that means, but as an elder who has articulated and stood up on the value of our spiritual traditions and all that it brings to us: healing, recovery, discovery, empowerment, sanity, if there's a such thing for sanity for people of color in this country. Right? All of
Right.
that is in the sauce.
Delulu is the Salulu.
Yeah. And my
Um,
compañera, my big sister Espy, is a very serious practitioner in indigenous spirituality and African spirituality, because that's what Puerto Rico looks like, right? And she has been that on top of being a hardcore radical, because we can't do one without the other. We got to be fully
You got to
human.
fight for that spirit.
Yeah, we got to be fully human. And she showed us how to be top-notch organizers with discipline and principles, but also to be fully human and armored with our spirituality and our culture and what that means in terms of being a sensitive and loving human being.
So tell us, how did she get you to go to the march with all that spiritual wisdom? What did she tell you when you first started
We
coming? And
actually
then and
had,
then tell me, what did you find there at the march? What have you found in that community?
yeah, she actually, we had a situation with a comrade, right, who was being accused of being exploitive of a younger comrade, somebody,
Was not
somebody,
aware.
yeah, right, and we were like, he was called out, and we had to do that, and as in that process, come to find out that he had a history of this kind of practice, right, and he had to be called out. It was painful. It was ugly. Folks took sides. Folks didn't want to have the full conversation. Folks were not comfortable with holding their comrade accountable because he just done other good things, like Cesar Chavez had done other good things. You understand what I'm saying? And to his credit, I have to say that calling out embarrassed him, as it should have. And from what we can see, it stopped. But it was that conversation that generated this whole thing, that she ultimately brought me to the Brides March. And then in my first march with y'all, we walked down Broadway. We ultimately get to Broadway, right? We walk past the Shabazz Center, right, which is across the street from Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. Shabazz Center was the Audubon Ballroom where Malcolm was killed. Okay, and just as we're walking past the Shabazz Center, she puts this in my ear. Zayid, we need the 100 black men, black and brown men, to come out against domestic violence. That's going to really help this, right? We wearing white and y'all wear the black. And I said, right on. I just said, right on. Because it was a natural, logical, sensible place to go with developing that side of the work. I wish I was more successful. I have to bear witness that we're not. It's difficult. Men are stubborn in their sexism, right? I apologize if however stubborn I was to women that have been stubborn too once upon a time. It's a conversation that's still
So
a go.
You know,
black and brown men. I remember we actually had a podcast with our common friend Kelsey. Kelsey's another survivor in the community who lost her sister to femicide, and Baba and Kelsey worked together at Equal Justice USA, Baba and I were there at the sentencing day for her sister, if I remember correctly, or a few court dates. He got 17 years for multiple stab wounds, and they shared children.
And let me wind this conversation up because I have to actually jump because Delaney Hall is hot and I'm actually on another show at the
Okay.
same time.
Yeah, what I wanted to, I guess, say is when you come to the Brides March, you bring healing to folks there. You said Esperanza told you you should wear black. Do you wear black every time you come to the Brides March?
Well, last year I wore white. I wore
Why is
white
that?
that reflects the spirituality of African traditional spirituality, or what we call Ifa, right? And I did that intentionally. And then I had the painful task once we got to Harlem to say something about the young man who I call my leader in terms of men in this work, and that's Quentin Walcott. We call him Q, and Q was a baby of one of my organizations, the December 12th movement. We raised him up, and we're very proud of what he's become. That he was medically unable to participate, right? And and at the same time, I also had to announce the death of Asada. All of that was right there, in my hand, right? And I had to process that in terms of, what does the weight of trauma that we carry with the stuff that we've been through personally, and the people we're trying to help, what does that do to our health?
Mhm.
Right? So I intentionally, wanted to reflect this how spirituality is connected to healing.
And
So
do you feel Brides March has been good for your health?
I hope so. I'm here. I'm still here. I just did a 102-mile march from Mumia Abu Jamal in the valleys of Pennsylvania, and I took y'all with me. you know?
Thank you. Yeah, you always bring us into the larger
Yeah,
conversation. I hear
for
you
sure.
taking off, and I guess I want to support us in helping men understand in the last minute that we keep you here. Like, why should they come? What does this have to do with guys? You're particularly involved in this, but I believe men are impacted by violence and the injustice against women. Because my cousin lost his mom, my uncle lost his sister. I know, men that are very impacted by the loss of amazing women in our community, colleagues, people that fall in love with folks. My
We
aunt had a
carry
fiance.
that trauma.
So why do you think
We,
men should come
we
this year? So
carry
we're gonna try to get more men to come. Why don't you
we
explain to them?
carry that trauma that comes with what you just said. Right? I'm trying to bring a young man. I'm trying to start a Malcolm X Human Rights Film Festival, and one of the films we want to spotlight, and this is going to happen in September at the Mason Center in Harlem. There's a film called Norman, right? Norman son, Norman father, right? A 6-year-old kid watches his father kill his mother. Father gets incarcerated for a brief time because he used a defense that got some mileage in his court proceeding, went back home to Jamaica, had no contact with his son for decades. Son becoming a social worker as we speak at Rutgers, goes to Jamaica to try and see if he can reconcile with the harm that he witnessed that his father did to his mother. We've got dozens of stories. We've got truckloads of stories like that.
Restorative justice, yeah.
Right? And we need and that film illustrates how how domestic violence, the harm of domestic violence cuts across where anybody that's involved in an incident when it goes down, it's gonna be harmed and needs healing. And nobody deserves to be harmed like that. Period.
Period.
Full stop.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us in our
Yes.
healing. Thank you for joining us in our content, and we're gonna count on you to bring a nice big group of guys to the march this year. And
Fine.
yeah, and I want to work to get you to really help guys understand what it means to be a part of this family. Because when it comes to Josie, the founder, myself, Kelsey, and any level of
Kelsey's my heart.
organizers in this march,
Kelsey,
we've been able to lean on you.
I got to say this. Kelsey's health. She's carrying the trauma of her family. You know, it's tough stuff, man. We got to take care of each other. We got to take care of ourselves, and we got to change the world and be the healing and justice we need to be.
My sisters, my NuAunts. Do y'all have any sort of thoughts or closing
I was just
words?
going to say, I mean, just, I don't know if it exactly fits here, But we try to talk about love and relationships, and we were talking earlier about love of community, love of country, and accountability is a form of love. When somebody takes the time and the effort to challenge you or hold you accountable, they that's love, that's energy, that's not something, if I had no use for you, I'd have no use for you, and I wouldn't speak to you again. So just sometimes when people are questioning you, try to look at it a little differently.
Yeah.
Have that opening.
Yeah. I want to thank you, Baba, for joining us tonight and just being a beacon of light and good energy and trying to bring more men over to the side of seeing us as human, going through this walk of life with us, and the least harmful and most helpful ways. I pray that your work continues to expand. As you say, you're finding it challenging because men are stubborn, but I claim that that's just it's unfamiliar territory, and that they get more familiar through exposure.
Yeah.
So,
We all need to grow. Growing is not a comfort gift. It's not a comfort zone.
mm-mm.
Thank you so much to Sally and everyone else who joined us tonight for episode 3 of NuAunts. Thank you for being the first male on our show. And everybody remember that
I
Saturday,
already got
September.
it on my page, by the way. I got the stream right on my own page.
Oh, okay. What can we do that now? How do we find it?
It's on your page. It's on your face. It's on the Brides March page.
Okay,
So I shared it out as soon as I got on.
Yay.
perfect. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we hope to be back back soon with you for episode 4. Look out for that. Peace out.